nobody's talking about retire tech, fintech specifically for the retirement plan, DBDC business.
We need to improve the retirement outcomes.
It's such a big gap from paper to blockchain. Let's do the digital first.
Finding distribution is a major trend for the fintechs themselves.
You have to be able to cut through the noise.
Everybody, and welcome back to the Curiosity Code. Today, we're joined by two incredible guests, Will Prest and Lisa Kottler, both experts in retirement, innovation, and fintech. Will has over 25 years in financial services, specializing in retirement, DCDB solutions. We'll talk what that means if you're not familiar with the term, wealth management, and insurance distribution. As managing partner at KWP Growth Partners, he's helped scale both startups and Fortune 100 firms, driving major growth in retirement strategies. Lisa is a 401k fintech innovator with deep expertise in digital retirement solutions, pooled employee plans, PEPs, and strategic growth. She's led go-to-market strategies and helped shape the future of retirement savings through cutting-edge technology. Together, they're launching the next Gen 401k report, mapping out the biggest trends shaping retire tech. Will, Lisa, welcome. Let's jump right in.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be here.
Both of you spend a lot of time analyzing where retirement tech is headed, and your next Gen 401k report is about to go public, mapping out 12 major trends shaping the future of retirement technology. Before we dive into specific, can you give us a quick overview of the report? What key trends do you see making the biggest impact on retire tech right now?
I think I'll start and I'll answer it slightly differently, which is Lisa and I have this sort of two tracks in our career. We both worked at really large brands in sort of the traditional retirement plan world, struggling with how to get traction and provide the best retirement outcomes we can for our corporate clients. And then we both went to startups where it was just we're trying to solve the same problems, but in very different ways. And, you're sort of just fighting for your livelihood every single day as a startup, trying to figure out that message market fit and trying to get traction. And roughly a year ago, when we were at a very large national retirement plan conference, we just made the observation that nobody's talking about retire tech, fintech specifically for the retirement plan, DBDC business. And so we're of like mind, and we decided to, join effort on this project. And so we just started collecting what are the kinds of companies that are fintechs that are doing different sorts of things, and really challenging the industry to bring new things forward and figure out how to scale. And then we suddenly noticed there's tens of companies, probably hundreds of companies, and we created we started with creating a retire tech roadmap that just gave the first sort of 10,000 foot view of how the retirement plan world works and who are the challenger brands within that. And Lisa, I think you might want to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, as Will said, we were talking about this at a big industry conference last year. And we were talking about the fact that you have like CB Insights, who does their FinTech 100 map. But as Will said, no one appeared to be really looking specifically at the retirement plan industry. And in our industry, we have these persistent challenges that we're trying to solve for. I mean, namely, it would be, expanding access, because today still 9 out of 10 employers still do not offer a 401k plan in the US after 50 years. We know, we all know that participation rates could be higher. More people, when they have a plan, could get into the plan. We know that we could boost engagement among those participants. And then, of course, ultimately, we need to improve the retirement outcomes. So we have these persistent challenges. As we said, we were like, there's a lot of this fintech happening in our world. Let's go take a look at it. So even for folks like us who are immersed in this, I have to say we were a little surprised that we found 60 companies to be on the map. It was more than expected. And we tried to categorize them in the best way that we could across the 9 categories. We know that will evolve over time. And if you'll notice on the map, it does say 1.0. We knew that this would just be the first iteration, knowing that we probably weren't going to identify all of them out there. It's tough to do. And that this will evolve over time. And interestingly, we had probably, I don't know how many, will probably like 15 at least companies raise their hand after we published the map and said, hey, we should be on this list too. So we know that's going to change and evolve, but we just wanted to at first at least create the awareness in the industry to make sure that everyone understands there is a lot of innovation happening, but we need that awareness first. And then now, how can we come together as an industry? How can we collaborate? And the last thing I'll say is, how can we get these fintechs to work with the legacy companies? Because the fintechs, they're nimble, they're innovative, but they don't have the scale and the distribution. Of course, the legacy companies have that in spades, but it's much harder for them to innovate and be quick and nimble. So if you could bring those two together, that's where the magic can happen. Of course, a lot easier said than done. We know we've tried to do that before, but the one last thing, I know I already said I would say one last thing, but the one last thing I'll say on this is that what's important too that we really want to focus on going forward is the collaboration among those fintechs, because I think the strategic partnerships among them and their ability to integrate will advance us forward greatly. But again, 1.0 with more to come.
So 12 major trends. What key trends that making the biggest impact on retired tech?
Well, I'd say first, we came to this as we put this map together over, probably a 6 or 7 month period, really started looking at this. We observed 12 trends that we thought were really important and that were happening in this process. And so to say which is the biggest or most important, this might be kind of a no-brainer, but the first one probably is that AI will power the future. And that's probably understood. We all know the acceleration, the quick pace that AI is moving, the opportunities that it presents for us in so many ways, not just efficiencies, but thinking, building new models and thinking about things differently. It's not just about, efficiencies and productivity. There's just a whole solution set that can be built because of it. And I would say probably that would be the key trend that we'd see. But maybe you have a different thought, Will.
Here's what so in putting this map together, we had conversations with lots of management teams, both on the map and ones that weren't on the map. We didn't even know about them, or they're like, this is, they brought it to our attention. And I think one of the consistent themes, and Lisa and I both saw this in the startups that we were part of, is finding distribution and figuring out how to, what does that fit is a major trend for the fintechs themselves. I mean, that might sound really obvious, but Lisa and I are probably asked about that every single week and in very different ways. But if you roll it up to a theme, they're really trying to figure out how to get distribution so they can get scale, kind of get into the slipstream of some of the right places. And so, as Lisa said before, sometimes that's figuring out how to partner up, and maybe that's through a proof of concept to sort of earn your way in. But that is a major trend that's in front of the fintechs. And I would say, as working in amongst all these different players, and also having had a leadership role inside a large brand, just the proliferation of fintech solutions and tools and ideas, I would profess that maybe one of the best things fintechs could do is work really hard to understand who their buyer is and how much noise they're digging, how much noise is in front of them. Like they're not getting like 5 calls a week. They're getting like 20, 40 outreaches, calls, chances to see a demo. And so you really have to understand them, probably be lucky that it's right time, right place, and separate yourself from the others.
Absolutely. If I could elaborate on that, I think it's a great point that you can have a great product, but if you don't have the right distribution channels, it doesn't really matter if you can't get that product to the right people. And to Will's point, you have to be able to cut through the noise because there is so much noise. And by the way, there are other companies who might be doing something similar to you. And so you have to be able to differentiate yourself and say it in a way that really connects with your buyers. And again, to cut through that noise. But you have to know your buyer to be able to do that. And I think if I were, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way at all, but if I were going to sort of give a knock on our industry a little bit, and look, plenty of industries are like this. So it's not only the retirement plan industry, but I think we could do more in terms of speaking directly to our customers. And that would be to the employers who buy the 401k plan, as well as to the employees who were the users of that plan, and find out what is their problem to solve. What is their job to be done? And then build the solutions. Because what happens often in the retirement plan industry, we build things that we think they need or they think they want, or that might provide another revenue option for us or avenue for us. And we build it and we put it out there and it gets 3% traction. And we wonder why. And it's like, well, did you talk directly to your buyer to find out what their problem is to solve? And did you build something that would be a solution that actually solves that problem and that they're actually willing to pay for it? And look, this is one of the very most basic innovation principles, but it's just not something we've historically done in our industry. And so I really think that doing that kind of work and getting the right distribution channels and go-to-market strategy, that is the most critical thing. You don't even have to have the best product if you get that part right.
I'd like to add on one thing that I think is super interesting probably for this audience is if you think about one of the biggest private equity firms out there that funds all kinds of technology, Sequoia, one of their guiding principles for the future enterprise value of any company is how much time they spend in front of the customer doing things that is valuable to the customer versus other sorts of things, busy work reports, whatever that might be, which ties back to the power of AI, that the more that you can get sort of regular repetitive tasks done or to give you more time in front of the client and or use it to obviously add value and solve problems for the client is Sequoia thinks is like a competitive advantage. And those that get mired in too much internal work and only kind of look inside, that's going to hurt them in the long term. So that's how they look at who they might choose to fund and who they don't.
I want to jump into technological aspect, and just for the audience to give a disclaimer that Lisa and Will are not technologists, but they're subject matter experts in the domain. So we will have interesting conversation about the retirement solutions in the domain and how digital-only retirement startups work, how AI-driven wealth management and retirement income is operated. So, but without any, technological nitty-gritty details. So just to set the expectations here. Well, I just want to start with you and tap into your experience with digital-only retirement solutions. So you helped launch a digital-only retirement startup. Can you tell us a bit about this type of digital retirement solutions, their main goals and the key benefits they offer compared to traditional retirement planning?
Sure, that's a great question. So as the second guy hired to help launch a firm that was squarely focused on the retirement plan business and then specifically building out a retirement income solution. So if you've helped people save, and hopefully you do a great job of doing that, how do they use that to their benefit? So if I fast forward 2 years of bumbling around and making market mistakes, the key thing that got us in the door and got us traction is that we simplified a very complex financial planning wealth management solution by basically saying, when you're ready to retire and you're thinking about planning for that, we can help you recreate your paycheck and your benefits. And that's why you'd come to us. And we can pull in all these different sources of information, which will help you get there. Because it's not just what's in your retirement plan. It's not just retirement income. It's also what are you paying for healthcare. And there's all kinds of other, in essence, cash flow decisions. That example of how do we recreate your paycheck and your benefits took us 2 years to get to that because we were so in love with our technology and the solution that it would bring forward that we found ourselves explaining that. And that's a lesson that you should avoid. And we tried lots of things. We kind of knew it was a problem. And I guess my best advice would come back to, if you use the mistakes as lessons, what I learned was the first time I meet you or reach out to you, I get 10 seconds. It's whatever you can write on the back of a business card, if you remember what those look like, right? And then if you're interested and it's a fit, then I kind of get what I could put on a PowerPoint page in 18-point font, right? And you could fill the whole page, but that's all I get. I literally get probably 10 to 20 minutes, right? They'll say half an hour, but you shouldn't take it. They'll appreciate it if you don't. And then if it's still a fit, and fit being super important, then you get to do the pitch. And especially at really big companies, which we were trying to connect into because we wanted their pools of employees. Like there were all kinds of ways, unions, credit unions, large employers, and white labeling behind a retirement plan offering that was already there but didn't have this solution. Large companies work on influence. So it's almost like a PR campaign. You have to understand how you can help them and what the fit is, and then you have to help them get a lot of other people on board to say, we need to work with this team. And again, from a go-to-market standpoint, that was our biggest learning. And I'll pause there. I answered part of your question, but not all of it.
No, that's fascinating. Love this story. Well, I have a question for Lisa. You mentioned that AI, obviously is one of the major trends in the industry, not only the reg tech, but retired tech, but and financial services in general. How do you see AI-driven tools shaping retirement income strategies? And are we heading towards full automated retirement planning, or will human advisors always play a key role? What's your point of view on this?
So specifically to retirement income, because look, I think AI is going to disrupt our entire industry, but specifically to retirement income, this is a subject and a place where our industry has really spent a lot of time the last few years, because we've done a pretty good job on the accumulation side. We've really helped a lot of folks. We could help more, but we've helped a lot of folks accumulate retirement assets. But then comes the really tough part is how do, as Will said, replace your paycheck and your benefits while you're in retirement? And how do you now distribute that over time? And those get to be very complicated decisions. And so I think where this is a place where AI really can add value. We've sort of dealt with static information, basic withdrawal rates, the risk tolerance questions that we ask in the participants in terms of trying to identify their risk. We've kind of had, some could say, one size fits all in terms of glide paths. But I think this is where AI could really step in, because you could potentially, personalize the withdrawal strategies that a particular employee or participant would use based on their own financial situation. You could maybe project longevity risk more accurately. Maybe.
Can I interrupt there for a second?
Yeah.
I wish I knew the name, Alex, but there's this random tool out there that's getting a ton of traction, which is basically it's your longevity predictor. And you put in a bunch of stuff about your background and it tells you basically how long you're going to live.
Yeah.
I have not wanted to put that in there.
I'm not sure.
But it's getting a huge amount of traction. I don't think it's telling you the day that you're done, but it is pretty important to understand how much you have to fund when you're talking about retirement income, because in essence, you're recreating your paycheck. That's the outcome you need. So how can you do that? Social Security in the US can pay for part of it. It was never meant to pay for all of it. So what other sources can you do? And that includes, doing consulting or part-time jobs or whatever. There's all kinds of things you can do to supplement it and to preserve your nest egg as much as possible, because for as much as we'd love to think that most of America has a large set of savings, most doesn't.
Right. Yeah, and to Will's point, you can see where AI can really help personalize that, identify a particular person's own gaps that they may have as they prepare to have retirement readiness. Yeah. Again, their own financial situation to help really create and structure a plan that's more appropriate for them versus these sort of static I don't know if you'd say one size fits all, but maybe a few sizes fit most. And so I think that's, AI really can play a part in that. Now, we haven't completely seen that yet, but I'm sure that it's coming.
It's interesting perspective on that, because one of the questions I had, and probably that's what we're talking about now. You can elaborate on that if I'm wrong, but the concept of embedded finance, when you integrate financial services into non-financial platforms. So, for example, the case that you just mentioned, like the longevity app, right? So the intention there is to focus more on probably on health and health habits, or like how to extend the lifespan. But then suddenly you can embed your retire tech in there and improve access to retirement and wealth management solutions. What's your point on that? Is that what's happening in the industry? Do you see like many such kind of embedded user experiences happening, or is just emerging, or it's not the case at all?
Maybe I start, and Lisa, you can jump in if that's all right. Embedded's a great term, and if I think I understand it, it's along the flow of decisions that you're making and the technology you're using, other issues come up so that it gets more automated into your decision-making process and gives you choices, right? That it's not just about payroll, it's bringing in other things that are affecting your paycheck. For that example, I think if you step up 5,000 feet, the reason we named our map the workplace retirement map is for a couple things. There's so many retirement and financial planning and income tools out there that are consumer driven, which are wonderful. We wanted to talk about, from an institutional standpoint, when you're at the world of work, what solutions do you have at your fingertips? All kinds of stakeholders have issues, because in the end, I'll give you an example. If there was a fantastic tool that could really automate and think through and say, this is likely based on your health habits, will your longevity picture and spending habits and lifestyle, your cash flow picture. The problem is that all my money isn't at that one employer. Even if I rolled everything in, there's all kinds of other information. So I think the big change is turning it inside out and looking at the person and that household and all the things that are happening for that household. So it's a workplace solution and it's a healthcare solution. Certainly in our retirement income startup, the number one thing we did was create partnerships with very large healthcare companies to figure out how we could work together, because longevity, illness drives so much of people's later in life life expectancy, obviously, but also just their expenses. And so I guess what I'm saying is the world is really converging, and with hope, the technology can start to look at the whole company and the whole person, instead of just I'm a benefits person, or I'm a wealth management person, or I'm a retirement plan person. And frankly, that's the impetus for founding KWP Growth Partners. Is when I was at the startup, and I know Lisa experienced this, you could hire fantastic subject matter experts, but they were sort of super good in their lane. But when you're on the other side trying to serve a whole household and you're trying to run a whole business, you need somebody, and this is from the front office perspective, that can connect solutions and technology and product in a way that's easy for the user to understand, and then connect that to distribution. So that's a multi-pronged sort of holistic issue. So I tie it all back to, it's really thinking about the person and their household, tying it back to the whole employer, because they have benefits, voluntary and healthcare, they have retirement. How do all those things get connected?
And I would say too, you asked, is it or do we have embedded, or are we emerging? And I would say it's emerging for sure, but it is starting to happen. So if you look at the map, there are 15 companies that are in the financial wellness category. Now, this is a category that we know will evolve over time, because the challenge with it, it's a very ambiguous category. There's some blurry lines for sure. Those 15 companies that are in it are arguably a bit different in terms of the services and solutions that they provide. So I think over time that category will probably break apart into more categories, and we'll be able to, put folks in places that might be more appropriate for them. But you are starting to see those types of companies who are trying to help from a holistic standpoint, help the employees really understand their financial aspect. Now, to your question about, is it bringing the health in? Not yet, but at least it's giving them a holistic look at their finances, including debt and student loans and emergency savings and some of those things that are a bit outside retirement. So we are starting to see more embedded solutions there. Where we first saw them, of course, was on the payroll side, and this gets back to our distribution as a competitive edge, where like there's a company on our map that is in the record keeping category that built fully digital record keeping system because they built it on today's technology. And they were able to integrate and fully embed into a digital payroll provider. And that really gave them a leg up in terms of distribution because now they have met their customers where they are, which is working on the payroll, a digital payroll. And it says, oh, do you also need a 401k, Mr. Business Owner? And they could click there and it went to this digital provider. So those types of solutions have already been there, but we're starting to see it happen a little bit more downstream. Like in the financial wellness category.
Yeah, I'd like to continue the discussion about the challenges. You already mentioned the distribution challenge. Some of the systems are legacy and hard to integrate with. But is there like the biggest challenge in the retirement income planning today that, has a spotlight on, and maybe there are ideas or already cases how fintech will help address these gaps and improve outcomes of retirees?
Yeah. I think as an industry, I would say our biggest challenge is and it's no fault of our own. It's just the timing. When we grew up as an industry, it was much different technology. If you were going to build from first principles and build today, and start fresh, obviously you have different technology at your disposal and you could build it much differently. So to your point, it is hard because we have some outdated systems that are challenged, many of them, to connect API to some of these fintech solutions. Mm-hmm. So that is probably our biggest challenge. The cost of changing these record keeping systems from how they sit today to either trying to, duct tape and glue them to new technology. And in some cases they can, some cases they can't. That is fundamentally our biggest challenge. And so, but that's why when you look at the map, there are in the record keeping category, most of those that are included in that category are digital record keepers. So they've all been founded in the last, 8-9 years. So they've built on today's tech, which is software. So they're fully digital, but they're having the challenge of getting the scale, right? So that's the challenge, right? As we said earlier, that, these fintechs have great technology, but it's harder to get the scale. Now, a couple of them are, and they now have tens of thousands. One of them is over 50,000 new clients, employers that are on their platform. So we're starting to see that. But again, fundamentally, that is probably the biggest challenge in our industry, just this outdated technology.
I think I might take another swing at that from a different angle. I completely agree with you, Lisa, but it's also, they need different systems to connect. So there's a technology connection problem, and I'm not a technologist, but I know that it's difficult. And but I can tell you, so there's a connection issue. The insurers of the world love retirement income because they have these great products that can, if you buy into them, it puts an insurance wrapper around it. So basically it locks you into an income stream. The first generation and second generation of those products were they were highly engineered and they were hard to explain to consumers. So that's the other side of it, is like, if they really understood the benefits, why wouldn't they just do it? But the issue isn't, in finance, this is why there's behavioral finance. It's not a rational decision. It's way more emotional. And so one of my favorite studies, which was actually done about 15 years ago, was somebody asked all the questions that would lead you to buying an annuity that didn't say what the investment product was, just said, would you like a consistent stream of income? If you could get that, and it would be guaranteed to never go down. And it wasn't until the last question in the survey that they said, if this product was an annuity, would you buy it? And all kinds of people said no, even though all the features that they said were in there was yes. So some of those income products have marketplace friction and issues. A lot of it has to do with behavioral finance and whether people are willing to give up. Because the funny thing is they want all the options instead of making some trade-offs. And it's really hard to get past those trade-offs. And then I would say we're probably in the third generation of retirement income products inside of a retirement plan. And they're much more participant focused. They have a lot of flexibility. They're portable. Their fees are fair. Because again, if you're going to have an insurance wrapper and guarantee something, that's not free. But on the other hand, if it's inside of an institutional workplace product, there doesn't have to be a lot of commission on top of that to make sure that distribution creates it. Like there's a different distribution lever, meaning it's institutional and there's not an individual salesperson in there. So I would say it's really coming back to the very first part of this podcast, which is it's a combination of technology, a product solution that all understands the household, and then what is the behavior changes and struggles you have to get through to get someone to adopt it. And we are getting better, and it is starting to see traction. And there's some really interesting ideas out there from both and partnerships with insurers and asset managers, because you need them to cooperate. And there's a lot of good examples.
Can I just reiterate a little bit of what Will just said? Because look, we love innovation. We love technology. We talk about it all the time, even though, as you said, we're not the technologists. But we do spend a lot of time thinking about how do you apply it and how do you use it as a business leader in building your company or launching new initiatives, those sorts of things. But I think what he said in there, there's two really critical points, and it does get back to, as great as a technology can be, it is so much about behavioral finance and understanding what makes people tick. And we know that people buy on emotion more than logic or data. And in this tech world that we're in, data-driven insights are fantastic and provide a lot of things. And some people would say, hey, if you can't measure it, don't do it. But I would say there's so much that's not quantitative that we really have to tap into and understand understand the emotion about buying. And these are really critical things that we're talking about. This is people's money. This is their ability to retire someday and not have to work until the end. And so it's really, really critical, important to understand that. And one other point I would make, that as an industry, I think that we could do a better job to what Will was saying. Let's speak to people in English, strip out the jargon, strip out the acronyms, and talk to them in ways that connect so they understand. Because as he said, they gave these list of questions in English and asked people what they were looking for and what they needed from their income. And then when they got to the end about annuity, now that might be a whole other topic that, people just have a negative connotation about annuities. But I think a first innovation, if we would just change the way we talk to our customers and the users of our 401k plans, we could make so much progress right from there, and then understand why they buy. Then the technology can come into play. But those are critical things I think our industry really should focus on.
Love it. It's probably a place for AI there as well, just to translate
Yes.
from one English to another English.
Yes.
I mean, we do a lot of website work, and what we do with writers is our bumper sticker is just please use everyday writing. Like just everyday language that you talk to your parents.
Yeah, exactly.
So that they're like, oh, yeah, that's simple.
Exactly, especially in financial services industry, like we love so much acronyms. Like it's just endless number of acronyms.
It is, and I would say in the retirement industry, it's even worse than the broader financial services industry. We have more acronyms: PEPs, MEPs, GOPS, QUACA. I mean, you could go on and on. It's pretty insane.
By the way, I have a question about PEPs, the pooled employer plans, and I have zero to none understanding what it is. So maybe we can start with that. But I'm also want to bring the context of like small businesses and gig workers that often lack retirement savings options, and I see a lot of that happening across, my peers, business owners, freelancers. How can Retired Tech better serve these workers? And maybe the pooled employer plans the best solution? What can you share a vision of that?
Well, I'll jump in because as I think Will said earlier, I actually I was employee number one in a startup that was leveraging the new legislation. So if you go back to the end of 2019, there was new legislation passed, Secure Act, that established pooled employer plans, or PEPs. Getting back to my acronym comment a minute ago, we have so many.
Is it PEPs or PEPs?
It's PEPs.
PEPs, okay. Sorry.
Pooled employer plan. Okay. Which also created a new role, just to throw one more acronym in there, is a PPP, or a P3 as some call it. The PEP legislation created this new role called the pooled plan provider. And so this really goes to help answer your question in terms of, are PEPs helpful? And it does tie into small business and potentially gig workers as well. So PEPs were created because, look, for an employer to set up a plan, there's a ton of administrative activities that have to take place. They have a lot of duties on their plate to administer the plan. It can cost a lot of money, especially if you're a smaller employer. It can sometimes be, unattainable. And importantly, you are now the fiduciary of the plan. So as the employer, whether you're the owner or some of the senior executives in that company, you now put your own personal assets at stake by offering a 401k plan to your employees. So if an employee comes back and says, you know what, you didn't give me enough investment options, or the fees were too high, and they want to sue you, your personal assets are at stake if you're sponsoring that plan. So it's a really crazy place that we encourage employers, hey, create this great benefit for your employees so that they can ultimately retire someday. Oh, but by the way, your personal assets are at stake if you make any mistakes on this. It's insane. Getting back to first principles, if you were going to build it today, how would you build a plan? I would argue that the way the PEP is structured is exactly how you would do it, because the PEP was created by Congress. Congress said, look, as an industry, you guys have done a decent job, but you haven't done it well enough. Again, 9 out of 10 employers still don't offer a plan. So how can we, as the legislators, remove some of those hurdles, and not only remove the hurdles, but create incentives for employers to adopt a PEP? So they did that. They removed some of the administrative abilities. They removed those fiduciary liabilities. Now, there's still some fiduciary liability, but it's much, much, much less. So they really removed those hurdles. And they said, by the way, if you adopt one of these plans, we'll also give you tax breaks, tax credits. So Congress did their job. So at our startup, we said, let's take this legislation and leverage it and use a digital first approach and get it out in the market. Because if you have 5.4 million employers that don't offer a plan today, and that makes up about 60 million employees, how are you going to reach them? How are you going to get to them? You have to use today's technology. So we built a digital-only PEP, and it included a front-end digital proposal system so that the advisors could very easily just create a proposal and get the plan set up. So you really could go from start to finish, from deciding if you want a plan to having a plan actually set up in the record-keeping system in like an hour. Now, did it ever happen that quickly? Not really, but feasibly you could. So we really tried to, and this is one of the trends that we included in our report that's coming out, is that legislation can, combined with technology, you really can make a difference. So I think PEPs would be the way you would want to build it. You've removed their fiduciary reliability. You've removed to some degree, a lot of the administrative tasks. And then you've made it much less expensive because now the employers join this PEP. You've shared the cost among all of them. So it's really more group pricing versus individual pricing. So I think PEPs could potentially be the wave of the future. And one last thing I'll say is that you can create a solo PEP. There's not a lot of knowledge about this. It's not happening a lot, but you can create a solo PEP, which would get to the gig workers that you're talking about. Because in the US today, there are 33, I think, million employers. 6 million of those have one employee or more, which means they could have a 401k because you have to have an employee, at least one employee to have a 401k. But that means there are 27 million that are sole proprietors. This gig economy that you're talking about.
Yeah.
The solo PEP really could help them. But we also have some others. Maybe you want to talk about, we have some on our map that can also help with the gig workers.
What's the category called there on the map?
Small business solutions.
Yeah, let's just speak a bit about that category and how that may help the solo workers, the gig workers, the small businesses.
So the solutions in there, so here's the friction point. When you're doing a startup plan, there's no assets in there.
Right.
Distribution gets paid by a small bit of fees on assets. So when you're doing a startup, it takes a long time for one small startup plan with a few bips on a quarterly basis to make any money, like to make $100. So that's why the startup world, or the very small plan world of 5 million plus employers under 20 employees are not really getting service because the structure of how much knowledge you have to have and whether it's worth it. Think about it very simply. If you're a gig worker or you're an advisor, what's my hourly rate when I get a plan on? It's about 4 cents in some ways. I mean, that's not much of an exaggeration. It takes time. So the solutions here are, if the employers are small and the asset base is 0 to small but can grow, is there a way to connect directly to the employers and or make it super easy, like the business that Lisa was talking about, where an advisor doesn't have to be a retirement plan expert but has a really good prepackaged with all kind of the best features that you'd have if you're working at 3M or Target or any large 50,000, 100,000 person company. And it's all prepackaged and they kind of click, 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 and it's done. So it's really fitting the need of the business model. Was a mismatch of that it was so labor intensive and difficult and required so much knowledge to get a plan in. This is prepackaged and simple and then scalable because you have great technology. And then these different companies, they just come at it in different ways and different creative ways to allow employers and employees to participate.
Yeah, and a couple, I mentioned the digital PEP that I was part of, but there's some companies on our map that also offer individual IRAs as a way to scale those, which is a great opportunity for companies or gig workers as well. Now, you can't contribute as much to an IRA as you can to a 401k, but it's still a great option for many. So there definitely are some more and more solutions that we're starting to see, recognizing just the growth of the gig economy.
Before we wrap up the conversation, I want to cover one more technical subject, which is blockchain and its role in this industry. It's getting more and more interest in financial products domain, and I'm really curious if tokenization or decentralized finance, DeFi, have a legitimate role in retirement planning, or regulatory uncertainty is too big a barrier to make it happen at this point?
Well, I'll kick this off. So, about 8 years ago is when I first learned about blockchain and studied it. And I immediately thought, wow, this is the technology that could be the future of the 401k record keeping system. The immutability, the security, the transparency, this could be the way. Now, again, getting back to what I said earlier, we're pretty entrenched already in these record keeping systems. So making that kind of bold shift would be really hard. But you could see, and the first real use case of blockchain is Bitcoin. And we've seen how powerful that has been. Now, I'm very much a Bitcoiner. The other cryptocurrencies, they're all proof of stake, whereas Bitcoin is proof of work. And, like Ethereum, we saw it switch from proof of work to proof of stake, and we see what happened. Like North Korea bust in last week, and there are some problems there. So for those cryptos that are using proof of stake, I think it's been proven that that is not the way to go. But if you can do proof of work, that kind of security, I could see where blockchain really could be a really formidable type of record keeping system in the 401k world. But you're right. The regulatory environment is so challenging. We so far haven't been able to get Bitcoin even as an investable asset into 401ks. Now, there is a company on our map who has done that. They've been able to do it. But as you can imagine, it's been, and I think with the ETFs that launched last year and the success that they've had, that will be helpful. I think we now have a pro crypto administration, and we had one that kind of worked against the industry in the last administration. So some of these dynamics are changing, but in the end, moving to the blockchain for our record keeping, I'm just not, it's hard to see that, because it could happen, but it would be very futuristic. What we are seeing is, as I said earlier, on the record keeping side of our map, that category, a lot of digital record keepers. So we are moving to software for record keeping systems, but could we get to blockchain? And you could see the power of it. Like maybe we each have our own account, like they've talked about doing in healthcare. I have my own block, and I start a new employer, and I give that employer access to my account, my 401k account. That would be, and having DeFi, tokenization, smart contracts, all of that. I mean, if you were drawing it out today, that sounds like it could be a great option. I just don't, it's hard to see that we would ever actually get there.
Yeah, it's such a big gap from paper to blockchain. Let's do the digital first.
From mainframe and COBOL to blockchain, yeah.
Right, and Excel spreadsheets.
What's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm completely aligned with Lisa's take on it. And I guess my color commentary on it would be, especially in the workplace and retirement plan, is governed by ERISA, DOL, IRS. There's every regulator in there, and they're really, really stringent. So some of our favorite people are ERISA attorneys, and they're busy 24/7. I mean, they are on the speaking tour. They're creating advice. They're giving advice to every player in the ecosystem, just distributors, fintech, legacy, how they connect. If we go to, when we go to market, what's our risk? How do we make sure we comply? And the legislative side of the world, it seems like you can look in the rearview mirror, and what was okay, and perfectly fine 10 years ago is bad, and then you get sued for that. And that might not sound completely fair, but so then everybody is very, very worried about litigation risk. And so that throws a lot of sand in the gears of fast technology. So I guess I would say for anybody who's on our map or wants to be on the map, you should reach out to us. That'd be great. We'd love to talk to you. But second of all, and learn, we want to learn. But second of all, you need these ERISA attorneys that are like our best friends, because you have to know exactly how to position yourself so that you're allowed to do business. And frankly, the allowed to do business is you go to a huge provider and you can withstand the due diligence storm. That is what you're going to go through, and it's not only just on cybersec; it's on the legislation. And are you able to prove and show that you are locked down on all these rules? Because the legislative and thus the punitive risk is really big.
Yeah,
from the standpoint of, like, if someone gets sued, maybe they settle just to get out of it, because there's so much that you get dragged through that you could say, well, do I spend millions or hundreds of thousands of dollars of fees on this side fighting it because I don't think I'm wrong? Or do I just settle for a painful number and be done. It's just very, very litigious, which is unfortunate, which is why the Secure Act and PEPs came around to eliminate some of that, so that wouldn't close down this small end of the market that really didn't have access to a super locked down, highly educated, high skilled retirement plan provider and distribution partner. They can't go to small companies because they can't afford to.
Yeah, you mentioned cybersecurity. It is such a risk in our industry. I mean, it is for every industry, and particularly financial services, but I know in retirement plan industry, it has ramped up. And so again, you could see where blockchain would be a fantastic solution. The immutability of it, the security of it, not, being subject to that, but it's still way too early days for blockchain, I think, for the retirement industry to be thinking about it, but it would be a great solution.
It'd be fun to figure out a way to sort of step into it, knowing that if these are the hurdles and the difficulties, there are a couple early hurdles that could be tested safely and would get you closer. And what's that progress? It's very hard to imagine with all the litigation risk that there's just going to be a big jump.
Maybe another geography, that's an answer here as a pilot. I don't know, some small country that doesn't have that type of legislation going on.
Right. That's actually not a bad idea. Right. And prove that it works.
Yeah, like MVP. Well, I'd like to wrap it up with an interesting question for both of you. If you were both retiring today with a typical 401k balance, how would you personally structure withdrawals, income streams, and longevity risk protections?
I know. Look, neither one of us is jumping. Well, figure out how to use AI to do it. No, really, and this is what we were saying earlier. It is such a complicated part to this. And, here we've focused all these decades on the accumulation. And quite frankly, that's almost the easy part. If you get people to contribute enough, because the most significant impact on the final account balance is the contribution rate. It's not the investments, and that's not how you allocated the investments. It's not the individual security selection that you picked. It is that contribution rate. So that's kind of the easy part. I think answering your question is super complicated. You do have to take in so many other factors too. Many people will only have the 401k, unfortunately. It's just the nature of the US, and some don't have that. But, have to take all factors. If you do have other investable assets and other areas of sources of income, then you can, you really have to think about the tax strategies of each and layering it and sort of laddering all of that. And it gets really, really complicated. And honestly, even as a retirement plan expert, I'm not sure that I am qualified I would have to find an expert and or AI to help me really make those decisions.
It's so complex.
It really is. And maybe you're better prepared, Will. I don't know, but
I think it first comes down to how do you think about finance in your house? So I've been in financial services for a couple decades. I know it really well. I was an advisor. I worked in retirement income. I'm not a do-it-yourselfer. And it really helps between my wife and I to have a third-party advisor that we really trust and like. So that's where I would start. So for me, it's what's going to give me peace of mind and help us make sure that we make the right decisions and we don't just suddenly make an emotional decision that would hurt us short or long term. So we are advisor aided for sure. And sure, I've access to all kinds of cool automated tools that tell me stuff. I still just like to have somebody that we can talk to, and they have helped us, our advisors helped us make really good decisions and just understand what the trade-offs are. He never says do this, even when I say, okay, so if you're me, what would you do? He's smart. He never says, well, just do this. He gives good advice. So that's the first place to start. And then the second place to start, knowing our personality type, is it really just comes down to lifestyle and cash flow and, frankly, living below your means. So whatever that is, the best solution is if you have a bunch of passive income, that's great. when you stop working. That passive income could be an in-plan annuity or some other annuity. That passive income could be real estate, or maybe there's a lot of ways to get there, right? So I think the answer is, because it's complex and it involves the whole house around everything that goes into this expense formula. So your healthcare, your cost of living, the way you spend, and the kind of car you drive, or the kind of vacation, whatever you're thinking about, and how you do it. And I guess the last thing I'd say is I'm on a couple boards, and I'm very involved in the industry and in some youth sports foundations, and I'm never going to stop working. So that's part of my income formula. Am I going to be working 60 or 40 hours a week? No, but there's a lot of good things that we can do as an advisor and help, to sort of shift. The last thing I'd say, and the reason I got there, is not only do I believe that, but in the retirement income startup that I was at, we did a huge amount of consumer research, and what we realized is that the new retirement is people just downshifting and doing things that they really want to do and that they care about, more than just sitting on the beach. Some people really want to sit on the beach, and frankly, I think if I sit on the beach more than 7 minutes, I'm bored. So that's how I'd answer it. It's a combination of having an expert, some good tools, and frankly, a plan, however it's put together.
But I would make a request, or maybe a plea. If you have any listeners because if you look at our map, we have a lifetime income category, and they're more around the infrastructure, building connectivity.
Right.
I think we've identified right now, a really great area to build some technology. And there could be some out there that we weren't aware of. So if there are companies, or maybe we go try to find them, that are helping make these kinds of decisions, particularly using AI, I think would be pretty powerful, and that we would want to add to our map if they are connected to the workplace. Again, we're not looking for the consumer-driven type apps, only if they're available in the workplace. But that's clearly a great area where everyone needs some help.
And I think the last thing I'd say is, if you go back to the impetus of, no one's really looked at this industry and challenger brands and fintech and technology-led companies in specifically the workplace retirement. We did this because we love the industry. We're not monetizing this map. We just love the industry, and we know the industry. And it's 1.0 on purpose because we wanted to create a conversation, and it's really created quite a conversation, and all kinds of back and forth with firms and companies and people and thought leaders that some we knew, some we never met. So we're just trying to encourage the conversation and see how we can help the industry grow. And I certainly don't have a lock on all the best ideas. So the more people that come and share, the better for us in the industry.
Well, Lisa, I have to wrap it up. I know that we can keep going and talking about this. It's first time we talk about retirement and retirement technologies on this podcast. I feel like we'll be talking more about it, because I see that there are lots of interesting places in the intersection of technology, user experience, legislation, that many of startups can jump in and actually deliver lots of value there. So I feel like we're going to talk more about that in upcoming episodes. But for now, thank you very much for taking the time to chat about this subject. It's been great, very insightful. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it was fun. We enjoyed it. Thanks for the conversation.
And for the listeners, thank you for listening for another episode of the Curiosity Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe if not yet, and hit the like button. And if you're listening it on any of the podcast platforms, don't forget to leave the feedback. It's really important. Thank you, and see you next time. Bye-bye.